Did you hide from the trauma of losing your mom at the age of 11 by pretending to be a spy with your imaginary friend who's essentially a more dashing incarnation of your dad? Did you do everything your imaginary friend told you to, darting on foot into traffic in a busy downtown intersection, committing Grand Theft Auto with the corpse of your nerdy adult male friend in the trunk, and shooting a man in cold blood? Did you drag the entirety of San Antonio into this wrong man spy mess, endangering much, if not all of the city, in your quest to single-handedly stop our Cold War enemies from getting secret plans that you didn't even get to see yourself? If so, you might have just found yourself in the Unkind Rewind, where we were thankful we didn't take a dirt nap in the San Antonio River like one of the villains in the 1984 Hitchcock for Kids thriller starring E.T.'s Henry Thomas, Cloak and Dagger.
Thrill me.
I'm gonna name you Coda. You get a name too, Podo.
I got good news and bad news, girls. The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
You too? You got a boner too? Blue Steel.
Salutations, hailing 1,250 miles up I-35 from the action in this film, cozily embedded in St. Paul, where I've been diligently avoiding being handed any video games by strangers. I am Josh Dugan. Joining us from the city that doesn't sleep but has often been the setting for Wrong Man thrillers is my co-host, Sean McGrath. Sean, have you been teaching children how best to play games and lending them your massive walkie-talkies?
Yeah. Kids stop by where I work. I basically run a game store from the back room.
Okay, cool.
I never really go out and deal with customers,
Sure.
but I allow children to come back unsupervised and play very, very close to my lap.
As one does.
Yeah. So, just my regular 9 to 5.
Yep. This week we're joined by our special guest, who was lucky he himself wasn't sucked into his own Cloak and Dagger fracas on one of his multiple contemporaneous family trips to San Antonio, Mike Wiebe. Mike, why don't you tell the audience who screwed the pooch and didn't listen to last week's installment a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Mike. I'm a musician and comedian, and I'm just happy to be alive after all this, all the Cold War scrapes that I went through here. And I grew up just a few hours north of where our hero had his action go down, and I can tell you that there was plenty of Russians running around Denton, Texas when I was growing up.
I bet.
Yeah.
So last week, I admitted to not having seen Cloak and Dagger since the George W. Bush administration. Sean, what was your relationship to Cloak and Dagger before this week?
Cloak and Dagger was a family rental movie night. And like I said last time, I have a heavy association with Cheese Whiz with this because it was the first time that my mom let us buy the kind of never go bad Cheese Whiz that sits like probably Old Dutch.
Cheese stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the cheese stuff that you throw in a microwave to radiate even further.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was not something we saw in theaters. It was definitely a rental, definitely something where I went, oh, it's the kid from E.T. And that was the last time. So we're going 30 years probably.
Maybe more, yeah. But
possibly
that
more,
ballpark, yeah.
Around 30, yeah.
And Mike, when do you think the last time you saw the staple of your youth was?
I'm gonna guess probably over. Trying to remember how old I am. 746.
I have that problem too. Yeah.
I mean, it's probably been 35 years. Like it's probably been. It came out in '86, and I probably watched it a lot on when it came on video. I saw it in the theater. I definitely saw it in the theater. I didn't see it because I was looking up afterwards. Originally, it was a double feature.
Yeah, which was
with the
News to
Last
me.
Starfighter. Yeah,
Yes.
and I think I remember. I think I remember that and wanting to see both of those movies because I didn't get to see Last Starfighter in the theater. I don't think, but I definitely remember seeing this. But we watched it a lot on home video. But it's got to be,
a strange concept that you just highlighted there, the double feature.
Yeah. I forgot that they used to do those.
I wasn't even aware that they had used to do those.
Yeah.
I only thought that was in reference to drive-ins. Like you would go and there would be two.
Yeah.
And it was kind of up to the discretion of whoever was running the drive-in to pick.
And this isn't
movies.
really drive-in fare, like this is like family-oriented drive-in fares, so much later at night. That's when people. I
was gonna say I probably looked a lot like Henry Thomas the last time I saw this theater in the theater. Yeah, I definitely was wearing shorts and tall socks.
Were you lugging around an impossibly large walkie-talkie?
Man, my friend who was in the 4th grade, he lived we lived on opposite sides of like an elementary school, basically in neighborhoods, and his dad was an army dude, and his dad had giant walkie-talkies, and we would like, I don't know, what do you call it? Not call each other, but walkie-talk each other at night. Yeah, so I actually did run around with big old walkie-talkies like that.
So getting into the pre-interview, Mike, did you let the doctor who was sending you demos know that you were going to be recording a podcast about Cloak and Dagger so he could prepare?
My therapist is already well aware of my Cloak and Dagger.
Well, no, the doctor who was like sending you demos after your accident.
Oh no, I haven't let him know yet. No.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's listening though. I'm sure.
I'm sure.
We found out now.
You can't trust adults. That's what I've learned from Cloak and Dagger.
That's the truth.
Not even olds.
Goddamn truth.
Not even olds.
Not even olds. So, about to throw the first clip. We asked you what drew you to Cloak and Dagger as a kid, and you spoke to its having been shot in your home state.
It was a big deal that it was shot in San Antonio.
Yeah.
In Texas. I think it was even though Denton is now if something was shot in San Antonio, I don't think that it wouldn't be a thing or whatever. It was just a big deal that a real movie took place in San Antonio. Like, as a family, we'd been to the Riverwalk and stuff like that, and we went back, I think, to San Antonio, to the Riverwalk. And for me, I remember being really excited about, kind of being able to play Cloak and Dagger, because I guess nothing else was really getting shot down here. I mean, maybe the exterior opening sequence to Dallas, and that's about it.
Was there anything strange for you this time around seeing San Antonio, a place you'd been then and since, circa late summer of 1983 when they shot this?
I mean, I had a visceral memory of, after watching the movie, there's a scene where somebody pulls out a knife and stabs it into the side of one of those boats, like they're trying the what do you call them? Riverboats? I don't know if they're riverboats, but yeah. And I remember playing that as a kid, pretending to, me and my brothers, pretending to have a mock fight on one of those boats.
Okay.
So, but based on this scene?
Based on this scene,
yeah. Okay.
Based on the scene. We saw it when we were down there, and I remember being really bummed out that there was no way that I was going to be able to jump off the boats at all.
Just like a sidebar here, that assassin misses that kid with that blade point blank.
Yeah,
he can't fucking shoot that kid ever. Yeah. Henry Thomas is running around pretty close to him, and he's firing at him with the silenced pistol, but he can shoot a mouse in the dark.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me? He sends that mouse to hell 5 feet away from a kid in a red jacket.
Yeah, that red jacket is not staying.
No. I mean, I thought you'd use the red jacket in the tunnel as a bait and switch.
Yeah.
But I guess the importance of tucking your legs up. That's what we learned from this. Got to tuck those legs up.
That guy was a shitty shot. All those spies were shit. I can't remember.
He was
took the first shot at him in the stairwell. because somebody was just.
It was
point
him, wasn't
blank.
it?
It
Yeah, I
was,
think it was him.
It was him.
That guy sucked.
I mean, if he's coming in from that stairwell where the scientist, I mean, because he kills the scientist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had no problem shooting 2 in the chest of the scientist.
Yeah,
Henry Thomas is right next to him because
Smaller target.
he exchanged, smaller target, but
He can only shoot adults.
I don't think Henry Thomas like had started to move. I think he
No.
was
Yeah.
standing, and the
Yeah.
gunshots. Yeah. Anyway, more on him later.
Yeah, lots more. So you surmised that it wouldn't matter as much to you now if a film had been shot in Texas. But I'm obviously this podcast is at least secondarily interested in nostalgia. Do you ever go back to any of the older, lesser known films that wouldn't have been on your radar as a child, but which were shot in Texas during your youth, like Fandango or Nadine or Blood Simple or Slacker or Heart One Highways Piranha?
Slacker for sure.
Okay, sure.
And I don't. Where was Blood Simple shot?
Austin.
I didn't even. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's none of that exists anymore. I guarantee you that is all.
No, some of it
high
is.
music.
Some of it's
Really?
yeah. Because they're out at Mount Bonnell. They're also one of their apartments is one of the ones like on Dirty Sixth. You can tell what it is by the
It's been a long time.
by the fucking arched windows.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get.
Yeah, they
back
shot
and
at the
watch
drugstore
it.
too. The old drugstore on Dirty Sixth too.
Yeah, I work right. I haven't seen Blood Simple in a long time. I need to give that a rewatch. But I work right near the strip, the whatever, where half of Slacker was shot. Like
Sure.
I work right down. I have to drive past all those kids and stuff like that. There was and I haven't revisited it, but there's a show that actually there was a Benji the dog TV
Okay.
show
Mhm.
that was actually shot in North Texas. But it was a show about Benji the dog and 2 kids and two robots that were just these kind of like plastic puppets. They were having adventures all throughout Denton. And I remember at one point they shut down some stuff in like the town square of Denton to film Benji. And I was bummed because I wasn't allowed to go run on set.
Did Necessary Roughness shoot in Denton too?
Yes, Necessary Roughness
Okay.
did shoot. Yeah. I was in high school when that happened.
Okay.
And I remember driving by, and Sinbad was in like a 5.0, and I was like, "Oh, Sinbad!" And then one time we were skateboarding on campus, and they were shooting a scene with Scott Bakula.
Okay.
And Scott Bakula saw me and my friends doing tricks over on like a little 2-stair, and he was like, "Good work, boys." And we were like, "Yeah."
You're like, that's Sam Beckett.
And then years later,
Did he jump into you by any chance?
jumped,
Did he
yeah.
leap into you?
Oh boy.
Because he wanted to he wanted to skateboard.
Yeah. But years later, I was working in Austin at a bar, a place called Rio Rita, and
One of my favorite bars.
a great bar. Guy came up, and it was like the first person of the shift, so there's nobody there, and he was talking to somebody, and I could tell that they were film guys, and he was talking film stuff, and they were just chatting for a little while, and it was the guy that played the samurai. That there's for whatever reason, there was a guy that was a samurai that was in Necessary Roughness, and I was like, I know you. Oh, you were the samurai in Necessary Roughness. He was like, oh my God. And then I got really excited because I remembered him from another thing.
Okay.
And my mouth talked quicker than my brain could handle. Like, oh, and you were the guy that got caught sucking some dude's dick in Brighton Beach Memoirs. I was like, oh yeah, that was me too.
Fantastic.
Actors love when you bring up.
Oh, Mike's
kind of
been in
stuff.
movies too.
Yeah, I was in.
Everybody Wants Some.
Everybody wants. Yeah, that was a real movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they could have you been recognized in that role?
Well, he's playing. It's kind of you're playing yourself almost.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
No, nobody saw that movie. Nobody really. Not many people saw that movie. We went.
Just us.
I remember. I remember thinking like, man, I'm part like because Dazed and Confused was such a huge movie to
Yeah,
me when it came
for
out,
sure.
and like young people and
Mhm.
like young filmmakers and stuff like that. And this was like the spiritual follow
Oh,
up to Dazed
absolutely.
and Confused. And I thought it was going to be as big as Dazed and Confused was, but it was not. It was no, most people haven't seen it.
Yeah. But
So
that was the full, that was all of Riverboat Gamblers, right?
yeah, that
Playing
was
in the
the
punk
full.
bar? Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, it was really cool though. They like we met with Linklater beforehand and talked about it, and we wrote the songs. Well, we one was a cover song by a band called the Big Boys, but it was an old Austin, Texas punk band in like
Hmm.
the early 80s, late 70s. And he was like, I want it to be in that era. And then he was like, what do you, it was just like off the top of his head. He was like, would you what would you think about like a cover of some like old TV show like Gilligan's Island? We are like, oh yeah, we could do that. We wrote it up and made it our, very like 81 punk version of that. But I think actually yeah, the song, the Big Boy song we used, like we went and like found like we did like an MDC song and a Dick song. We
Okay.
recorded like 4 or 5 things and we're like, these are all of that era. And it was just cool that he was just like, yeah, I don't know, find something that works good. And yeah, it was a really cool set too. Like it was a fun. I'd never been on like a
Big set.
big set. Yeah,
Yeah,
like a studio. I'd never been on a studio set for
sure.
sure. It was cool to see it all work out. I remember sitting next to that guy, Glenn Powell,
Yeah.
in makeup.
Who
He's
lives in
now
Austin
like
now?
he lives in Austin, and
I mean, he is from there at least. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
He had big jock energy too on there. And I was really like, so he's kind of blowing up, and I kind of always think like, why are we letting this jock fucking dick get so big?
Yeah, yeah.
Granted, he plays a dick in most of the things he does. Maybe he's a
Sure.
sweet guy, but I remember sitting next to him in the makeup chair and being like,
You're
he was
like, this
really
guy
not
this guy
finishing.
needs makeup.
Yeah,
Especially he's playing a baseball player. Like, he doesn't need that much makeup.
yeah.
But yeah.
He was
I
real
mean,
cocky. He was real
Sean
cocky.
was in Twilight, if you weren't aware.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
What were you
I,
in
I I
Twilight?
I had that big frat energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the scene. Well, you can say it. You can tell it. I don't need to.
For the record, I didn't bring this up.
I did. I brought it up. I brought
No,
it
I'm
up.
excited. I want to hear.
We corner Bella kind of in a parking lot and are way too physical with her, and Edward shows up to save her in a car, scares us away into the night. Bunch of drunken frat boys coming out of a bar.
Oh wow, that's
Mhm.
awesome.
They reused the footage too, so he got paid a second time. They
Oh,
reused it in a
nice.
flashback in the second movie.
That's the best.
Yeah, it was
That's
nice.
the best to get paid for not even having to show up. I always like I've shot a lot of stuff and I do some acting and stuff here and there, and I'm always like but you get to act in stuff that's filmed. Like I mean I don't get to very often. So every time I get something I'm really excited, but then the day of when I'm actually there I'm always reminded like, oh yeah, this is really fucking tedious. And
Oh, it's so boring.
I used to be so hungry for it. I would like say yes to anything, but now I'm like, is it outside? I don't know.
Have you been in it? Were you in any of the David Gordon Green stuff? Were you and Joe or anything?
No.
Okay.
No. I wish.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to be in.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Johnny was, but
Yeah.
So about Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, back to Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
When you played Cloak and Dagger on the Riverwalk, did anyone end up in the drink?
No, I wish. That would have been a story.
I mean,
No,
even if the bullet hadn't killed him, right?
Oh, San
Yeah.
Antonio River would have.
Oh, for sure. That's some sludge, brown
Gross
sludge.
ass water.
I remember like being, not only not getting to jump out of the boat, but having parents there and them having a really, they wouldn't let us walk 2 feet away. And I just remember the disappointment that I didn't get to like really experience the Henry Thomas freedom
Experience.
of running around.
I mean, now's probably as good a time as any to talk a little bit about Henry Thomas, whose career prospects couldn't have been brighter at this point in time. So after Quiet 1983, San Antonio's own Henry Thomas was in 2 films in 1984. The Jerry Schatzberg family drama flop set and shot in Tunisia starring Gene Hackman, Thomas, and Rip Torn. That was misunderstood. And then this, Cloak and Dagger, a project which originally began as an adaptation of 1949's The Window, which itself was adapted from a Cornell Woolrich short story, The Boy Cried Murder, which is why he's a credited screenwriter on this. But this became what it was specifically to play to Henry Thomas's strengths. According to IMDb trivia, and this could be apocryphal, this was shot in Henry Thomas's hometown to accommodate him, given that he remained in San Antonio and did limited work as an adolescent and teen after growing uncomfortable with his unfathomable popularity following E.T.
Yeah.
This at least kind of passes the smell test.
Yeah.
But
That
now
makes
you
sense.
said you had friends who knew him.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
coworker that, as an adult, knew him as like in the aughts.
Okay.
So he wasn't really
When he was
acting
like playing in bands and stuff.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Now we asked you what you remember the plot of Cloak and Dagger being, and you said
Henry Thomas gets a video game with a secret code in it, some sort of secret code of plans, and he runs afoul of some bad guys, some spies that are trying to catch him, and he's aided by his dad. So his dad's a real, I believe his mom is dead. His dad is a real guy, but he has an imaginary character that his dad also plays.
Okay.
Named Jack Flack, and it has to do with a role-playing game. Jack Flack, I think, comes into a role-playing game, so he's often conversing with his imaginary friend, who's his dad. And I definitely remember there being that 80s edge of kind of I think people call it Kindertrauma, where they don't really make it, they don't really do it as much anymore, where like, I remember feeling like as a kid he was really in danger, and I remember he kills a guy and is really bummed out about it, and I definitely remember like, because we watched this a lot on VHS afterwards too, and I remember being like, man, I would have been fine with killing that guy, that was a bad guy, like definitely not. And my parents being like, no, that would, not in those words, but going, no, that would fuck you up if you killed a bad guy. No, not me. I'm too tough. I'm from Denton, Texas, Mom.
Yeah, it's going back on that, like, and I think I remember getting lectured about how it was not okay to kill people, and being like, well, what if I'm in that situation? What if I'm in that
He's
situation?
literally pointing a submachine gun at Henry Thomas. He's pointing it, and
he's telling him about how he's going to kill him
in a really, really bad way, like, which makes me think, like, why not just do it also, right? Like, it's not like you see bad guys who have to like say what they're gonna do to the kid if he doesn't give them the gun, like, because they're without a gun. But he has, like, what more could he get from Henry Thomas at that point, right? It's not like he needed more information. So why is this bad guy kind of posturing about what he's going to do, how he's going to like dismember this fucking 10-year-old or whatever? But what like, why is he hesitating? I get that it's a movie, but also like, you're just giving this kid who has a gun on you more incentive to fucking shoot you. It was a weird scene.
He really monologues a long time.
Yeah, he does his James Bondian bad, villain monologue there.
And I guess him.
But does he have a superhero? Does Henry Thomas have does Davey have a superpower here? Because the guy sees Jack Flack, right?
I mean,
we're meant to believe this.
He's looking. I mean, Henry Thomas is doing that thing where he's looking to the right, right? And this guy,
it's like right next to him.
This guy can't.
When we get a different angle, it is right next to him.
Yeah.
He can't wrap his head around the fact that this scared kid, is like, darting his glances to the right. But I also feel like maybe that is the like that's the justification that we're using for
Mhm.
Henry Thomas to pull the trigger, is like this guy is going to torture a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, yeah. He's like, I'm going to shoot your kneecaps first. Doesn't he say that?
Yeah,
said-
and then
yeah.
I'm going to shoot you in the stomach and
Yeah.
let you bleed out,
Mhm.
and yeah, really kind of morbid stuff for a kid movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's uplifting, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Now, did you remember at all that he got the video game from a guy who he saw shot and killed in the stairwell?
I didn't. I remember that he got it from the nerd that worked there, but I definitely didn't know that the nerd was Bill Forsyth in a very. I mean, that guy never plays nerds. Like,
But he brought.
always.
Oh, yeah, that was such a weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking the scientist.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
that's
because
right,
yeah,
the
he gets a
scientist,
game in
yeah,
the
the
stairwell
scientist
first.
game,
Yeah. But
yeah.
obviously, Bill Forsyth is the one who unlocks the.
Yeah.
And Henry Thomas, I'm not crazy. Henry Thomas never sees the plans, right?
No, only
It's just
Forsyth.
Bill Forsyth. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, I guess it was.
So like
only him.
Henry
Was it
Thomas
the-
doesn't even know what he's like, or Davey doesn't
Yeah.
know what he's even going after.
Is a vector graphics of,
Invisible bombers.
yeah.
So you recalled the father/imaginary friend Jack Flack and the dead mother elements pretty well. Was there
Yeah.
anything about that kind of like area of the film that was a surprise to you?
Not really. It was pretty
Okay.
much as I remembered it, with the splitting time between boring dad and then cool Jack Flack or
Who he
whatever.
says
And
he
and the
hates,
role playing thing, I definitely remember the giant when it on screen. I'd forgotten about it, but those giant dice, and
Mhm.
remember thinking like, man, that's a fun game. I wish I'd like to play that. But that was like, right around the time of like, I grew up in North Texas with fairly conservative religious parents, so Dungeons and Dragons was like, that was Satan's way into.
Oh
the
yeah,
home.
we all saw Mazes and Monsters.
Yeah. So I was
It's gonna make you commit suicide.
Yeah, it's gonna make you commit suicide.
But
So
so could you wrap your head around as a kid, like what that game was? I had never seen that game in the arcade, and I guess, according to the information on this, it was never released actually on the 5200. It only existed as an Atari arcade machine.
yeah,
So even the game itself, the prop itself had to be,
Well, you know why that happened, right?
yeah, I mean, Atari crashed and
Yeah, the
burned.
5200 was such a fucking disaster that it was basically like discontinued after 15 months.
Yeah. But I'd never seen this Cloak and Dagger arcade game. I'd never heard of it. I didn't even get that there was a correlation between the two things when I saw this movie. And this game looks like so frenetic, and almost like a combination of like, I don't know, Tron and I don't know, like it's a really confusing game what's going on in that
yeah,
screen.
it looks
Like
very confusing.
there's the elevator levels, which are kind of cool because they have this animation to it. And we see that there's a guy in a trench coat. There's the spy. There's the flak, whatever. But what's going on screen is fucking batshit.
Yeah, it just
And
looks
like, if I was Dabney Coleman and my kid's playing this game, like I would have turned it off way before he did. I also love the little like parent convention of like turning off the TV when they think they're turning off the game.
Yeah.
yeah,
As soon as you turn your fucking back and close my door, Dad, that TV's coming
going
back on.
Yeah.
yeah.
You didn't do shit. I might not
Yeah.
even lost a guy.
Totally. Yeah, I never played that game. I remember looking for it, like always, sometimes there'd magically be a new arcade machine in the local Denton Triangle Mall arcade, and I was always looking for it and hoping that it would pop up, but I never saw it.
I'm assuming that as a kid who played video games, that there was probably somebody I went to school with who claimed that he had a copy
Yeah.
and claimed that he played it at his cousin's house or something.
Yeah.
Like, you could lie so fucking easily about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Growing up in Denton, everybody was somehow related to the Von Erichs. Every kid was a cousin of the Von
Uh-huh.
Erichs or Yeah, and I don't know if they shot. I think they probably did shoot some of that Von Erich's movie, that Golden Claw, Eagle Claw,
Iron
whatever it
Claw.
was, Iron Claw. But yeah, so that was every kid was lying about that, because those guys really did grow up in that area too.
Peter, by the way, thought he might have had a 5200.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
I never met anyone with one.
Having a 5200, yeah, is a white whale, but having Cloak and Dagger is something only lying kids have.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, how did you feel about the danger Davey was in this time around?
It all came back. Like, I will say, watching this whole movie, like, it's kind of hard for me to be too critical of it, because I could not take my nostalgia glasses off while watching it. There was a lot of like weird feelings that it evoked in me. But yeah, again, like, it's a adult male talk. I mean, name me another show where they're talking about torturing a kid like that so freely.
The Goonies, actually.
Did they
with Chunk? They're gonna put his hand in the fucking.
Oh,
blender.
That's right. Yeah, I remember being.
Yeah. First we had the fleshy tomato.
Yeah.
Then the pop little hand.
But I mean, it's rare and not nearly as like it. This feels.
That was an '80s thing. I mean, I'm saying like now, there's not like.
Oh,
I don't
sure.
think
No.
that there's anything close to that.
It would be.
And even then, like, this feels pretty extreme for this.
Yeah.
Like, he sees, like, people die in this.
Yeah.
So death is like on the table.
Yeah, is the big chubby mustache man gets just, and that's the other thing too, is like, when the day after all this goes down, when when Davey's processing not only the murder that he committed of the one guy, but also, like, he pretty much caused the murder of the other guy magically, but still he did it. It's on him. So there's two bodies that this.
And he got to hang out in the trunk with dead Bill Forsyth.
Yeah, there's a lot of bodies here, right? Because he's blown up two olds.
He saw the fucking scientist in the stairway die.
Yeah.
Yeah. He saw Bill Forsyth is dead because of what he brought him. Bill Forsyth lives a long, probably loveless life.
Yeah.
But does not get shot through the fucking head at his computer. Henry Thomas brings a bomb onto the plane where two olds are killed.
Yeah.
And then each of those hitmen die because of his involvement. Like, wait, one goes through.
So Rice, both hitmen, the two olds, the scientist, Bill Forsyth.
The scientist is the only one that's not his fault.
Yeah.
Like, that he's not complicit in, or not complicit, but not involved in.
Yeah.
Because if he is killed along with the scientist in that stairwell, none of those other people die. It ends with him.
Man.
So you're saying he should have stayed in.
I'm saying that Henry Thomas has
6 bodies on his
destroyer of worlds.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot to
That's a lot on your shoulders. I don't know, and your mom too. We don't know how she died. But probably
it was probably wrapped into this.
Yeah, you probably didn't. She either didn't love you enough to keep going, or you didn't return her maternal love enough. Something very, very clearly related to you is the reason your mother's dead. And I don't know if your father walking away from a burning plane is going to be enough to save this kid.
Yeah, there's gonna need that ketamine therapy.
You really felt. You really felt like in that scene, like Flack had betrayed him. You know, Flack endangers this kid's life. So often.
But this kid's also listening to a fucking imaginary friend. Like, I'm sorry.
But
that's
Josh, like,
himself. That's his subconscious, though.
But you're blaming the victim, right? Like, you're gonna say,
no, I'm blaming the person who's making himself do it. His subconscious.
He's a schizophrenic. He's a schizophrenic.
It's because it's not just that he's imagining these conversations. He engages. I mean, we see it through the eyes of
Rice at the end.
Yeah. He's actually arguing and talking with Jack Flack.
So, how did Henry Thomas killing a bad man in a heavily trafficked tourist destination play to adult Mike?
I mean, I just, I, I was, I was just betwixt with the anarchy of it all. I was like, oh, I love seeing something that is so wrong in
Uh-huh.
today's that would
Oh,
never
yeah.
happen now. It was pretty gleeful.
Especially, I mean, it's the fucking Riverwalk. Like,
Yeah, right
it's
on the
one of the
Riverwalk.
biggest. It's one of the biggest like tourist destinations in Texas, isn't it? This like second or third after
I
the
think
fucking
so.
the Alamo
I'm sure it is.
and that fucking the outlet mall in New Braunfels or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that Riverwalk? I'm assuming that that's where he was there at the end, right? Is that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know about dead ends that kind of function the way that one did.
I don't.
Yeah. I don't think there are.
That
dead
seemed
ends.
really contrived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is there ever a time of night where
There wouldn't be
it is
anyone there.
that
No.
vacant?
No.
And it's not even.
I mean,
'cause
after
he's-
bar time, but this is not. This is still
he-
like.
But he still has to go
Yeah.
to the airport. It's like
Mhm.
there's a
yeah.
midnight
And we know
flight.
that he doesn't get to the airport. It's still before midnight.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like when they show New York City, like modern New York City, and there's like a flickering street lamp and nobody on the streets,
Yeah.
and muggers are kind of allowed to come out of the shadows like ninjas. I'm like, there's a fucking like CVS on every corner.
Uh-huh.
Everything is
Or
super
Dwayne
bright.
Reed, yeah.
Yeah, there's 1,000 people on the street at 4:19 a.m.
Yeah.
And yet Henry
Yeah.
Thomas is allowed to
Murder.
do the what was his the pincher maneuver, the crossfire.
Crossfire,
The Crossfire Gambit or
the
something like
Crossfire
that. Yeah.
Gambit,
Remember
yeah.
that?
yeah.
I mean, I get that like the submachine gun guy could like eventually shoot the guy in front of him, but like he runs straight at the guy who has a silenced handgun.
Yeah.
And that guy again is just allergic to
So
shooting
bad.
children. He can
So
do
bad.
everything else, but he cannot hit a kid.
It's preposterous.
Yeah.
Not hit the side of a barn with that gun.
Not hit the side of a Thomas.
So after talking wistfully of a summer spent watching Cloak and Dagger, Clash of the Titans, and Star Wars virtually every day, you noted that it took forever, or it felt like it took forever, for E.T. to make its way to home video and cable.
Yeah.
It did take forever. You're not remembering things erroneously. They milked another $60 million out of a theatrical re-release in 1985, and then held out
Wow.
another 3 years for an eventual October 27th, 1988 home video release. Now they priced back then videos were like $90.
Yeah.
They priced E.T. at $24.95 with the intention of like having people actually buy it. They sold over 15 million units, making $250 million in video sales revenue.
Jesus Christ.
That was a record until the next year for when Batman broke it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the home video release.
Say
for
that number
E.T.,
again, Josh.
$250 million. The home video release for E.T. in 1988 outpaced the top grossing film at the box office in 1988. Fucking Who Framed Roger Rabbit by more than $90 million.
Wow.
It definitely goes to show, like, I mean, why parents might want to shut down a kid's career when things are like that fucking crazy. you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
And then being from Texas originally, like if it was an LA kid, I think they would have just gone.
Yeah.
So that in
That would
today's
be-
money is $663 million in
Damn.
video sales.
It's
And Josh, you
bash.
mentioned earlier that Henry Thomas had a relatively quiet year in 1983. I'm sure that ET like pandemonium kept it pretty fucking insane
Right.
through 1983.
Well, it was
Yeah.
just release wise. Like it
Sure.
was still just like all ET buzz. I mean, he shot both of these in 83, but
he is
didn't
not
come out
living
for
a
a year,
normal
yeah.
life for what,
Yeah.
5-6 years?
no, but I mean, he does Frog Dreaming in 85, and then, which I think is also called Conquest, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that the one where he's out in?
That's the one in
Outback or-
Australia, yeah.
Yeah.
And then here, sorry, I had his page up. Yeah, it was Frog Dreaming in the Outback. And then he really was only in 2 more movies in the 80s, Murder One and Valmont, which don't really have a... I mean, they both sound vaguely familiar, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
But he really didn't, like, from then on, Fire in the Sky was like his next kind of bigger movie in 93.
Yeah.
And Legends of the Fall the year after. But...
Yeah, then he starts popping up and stuff like once every couple of years.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. Now, you talked about your dad being the tape master and being responsible for if you could watch a rated R film that he deemed okay for you to watch. Was he a movie guy generally?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I think that he was more of a collector guy and an organizer guy. So there was something he really liked about he would tape all these movies, and it was mostly for us, for kids. And then he also had like a binder that all the tapes were numbered, but there was like 3 movies on a tape. All the tapes were numbered, and he had like a binder that you could cross-reference which movie was on which tape, and you could look it up alphabetically, or you could look it up by number. And I think he enjoyed that probably more than watching movies.
And was this a handwritten list, or was this
handwritten? No, it was typed up. He typed it
typed
all
up. So dot matrix printer and all that.
Yeah, total Texas Instruments.
Sure.
Is there any possibility these master lists still exist?
I wonder.
Wow, that would be such a great item.
I don't know what happened.
The Unkind Rewind wants to take a look at that.
For sure.
We
could do a whole just bonus episode, like thinking about how funny it is that these movies are on the same tape together.
Yeah,
and also when you make when you put the time in, like your dad did, to do something like that, like you can't really envision that there's like a better way to do it, in the future.
Yeah.
I bought the NBA encyclopedia. It was like more than $100 because I was like, well, how else are you going to see statistics for retired players?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Like, you have to get this. It's like an encyclopedia. And $100 in like 1995, it was the equivalent of $450,000 today.
Yeah.
That's how much money I spent on that fucking book. Where is it? A fucking Goodwill, probably.
Oh no, you gotta get that book back.
Nobody wants. Yeah,
I'm sure I can find it for Sean for about $5.
I do not want it if it was in a free library on the side of the road. I don't have the room in my apartment for that book. But yeah, we would love to take a look at the master matrix
for sure.
list.
I'll have to ask if that list exists anywhere.
He has binders full of movies.
Yeah.
Binders.
So I asked you what you thought it was about Cloak and Dagger that appealed to your younger self.
I think that it was a kids having adventure. Definitely a kid adventure was a big part of it. I remember liking that, like, him and his little friend were able to, like, they were able to go around, like they were like getting on buses and going around. I thought that was so cool that they seemed to have their freedom around town. And I remember thinking it was so cool that it was just a movie that was talking about or acknowledging video games.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being really bummed that wasn't a game. I think you could get that game, I guess, but I remember it wasn't on like an Atari 2600. They're playing a different type of Atari, like a more expensive version that none of my friends had. And I never played that game, but I always...
Yeah, it was made for the 5200.
I never met any kids that had the 5200. Did y'all have friends with one of those?
I never had an Atari.
Okay, yeah, I'm old.
Well, I mean, I was born in the 70s also.
Yeah.
I just didn't have an Atari. So obviously we kind of touched on the video game stuff, but how did their unbridled freedom in the city play to you now?
Glorious. I still miss that. I want that freedom. My wife won't give me that freedom.
And she's little too, right?
She's
like
tiny.
she reads like about 5 or 6 in this. She is not a precocious kid. She's a whiny, like murder me kind of girl.
Yep.
That should be on a milk carton by the end of this movie.
Maybe she'll die.
Yeah, I mean, I kept forgetting that they're not related. Like they had that kind of bratty brother sister.
Yeah.
But like if they're friends, she fucking hates this kid.
Oh,
Like,
you know what's funny is I remember I was talking about my friend with the walkie-talkies. Occasionally we would go and we would ride our bikes to a little ways. I lived kind of on the edge of town, and we would ride towards this area, and you could get truckers on CBs. Getting there, you could hear truckers talking, and you could talk to them. And I remember my friend going, "Davey, this is embarrassing," and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. His impression of what's her name?
Yeah,
is it Kim?
Yeah, Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Yeah, she like I don't know why. I mean, yeah, she from her attitude, she should not be hanging out with Henry Thomas.
No,
everything was a chore for her.
Yeah, she hated
but
it.
every other boy she hates even more than him.
Yeah,
she was never
right.
fucking happy.
Yeah,
and again, completely had her life endangered by Henry Thomas's actions.
It does remind of the time that where your friends were whoever lives in your neighborhood, and that's it. You know, whether you really like them or not, that's who you got to play with.
How did Davey's friendships play to adult Mike? Because he basically has two friends here. It's her and
Bill Forsyth.
Morris. Yeah, Bill Forsyth.
And he never left that room, right? Except to like die in a fucking car.
Yeah, like, his body was dragged in the car. He didn't die in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've only seen him alive in that back room. Like, I don't even know if I don't even know if he stands.
I don't think so. There's a lot more.
Don't we see him in the front of the store too, or do we not?
I don't think we
one time.
Maybe.
Adult Mike sees a lot of red flags in a guy that old hanging out with kids that young in the back of a store.
Yeah.
There's a lot of red flags. I didn't see that when I was a kid. I obviously didn't notice that at all. Like, because there was the idea that there was, you know, one of my friends had an older brother who I kind of looked at as like an older brother, you know, figure for myself. And but yeah, he wasn't that old and he wasn't a nerd. But there's an age where you're really young and you just think anybody old that's not your parents, it's kind of cool. Like I couldn't imagine an adult liking a video game when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I remember wishing I had a sort of back room.
Yeah, they really had to nerd him up, right? They really gave him the patina of nerd, like those fucking glasses.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even remember if I've seen Bill Forsyth in glasses, and those things were thick boys.
Yeah.
It's weird to see them the lenses be that thick, but they're obviously like not a prescription of any sort.
Well, did he own that store, do you think? That computer
I don't
gaming
think
store?
I mean it was a mall, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
That's the exterior of that, or the that's in the Glendale Galleria, actually. It's one of the only scenes that they didn't shoot in San Antonio.
Oh, really?
But they shot I think they shot the back room. The back room doesn't feel like it's part of the main part of the store.
Yeah.
I wonder if Bill Forsyth had to get on a plane and go be a dead body in a trunk. Like, can you get down to San Antonio, please?
Well, no. I think all the Bill Forsyth scenes were they shot the going into the gaming store, but I think the back room is in San Antonio.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, as long as he didn't have to take a flight just to kind of stare absentmindedly up at Henry Thomas.
Yeah.
Literally absentmindedly.
Oh yeah. There's
paved a path.
His head is absent of brain.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
His look screams somebody that should not be allowed around children.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. What kind of freedom did you like? What level of freedom did you enjoy in Denton when you were a kid?
At that age, there was like a 2-block area that I was allowed to go, and then occasionally, I was able to walk to my friend's house that lived on the other side of my walkie-talkie friend. But even that was kind of like, there had to be like coordinated plans with his parents or whatever that I was headed over that way. I wasn't allowed to walk that far on my
You weren't
own.
taking the bus downtown.
Wasn't taking the bus downtown. But I think like around the time I was like 13 or 14, um, maybe even 12, there was a trolley that would go downtown, and I was
Okay.
skateboarding around. Once I got into skateboarding, it was a mix of like getting a little bit more freedom and also lying and you know,
Granting yourself that freedom.
yeah, granting myself that freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. This is my Atari note. Oh, so the game did eventually make it to the home video game market. Anyone want to guess what year that was?
Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm sure you can play it now if you dig
You
deep.
can.
Like somebody
2022.
Oh Jesus!
Whoa.
Atari 20 came out. It was a video game compilation, and the fucking Cloak and Dagger game was on that.
Wow. I feel like a friend of mine recently had some like modded out system. I don't even know what it was, but that has like literally like 500 games on it. And I feel like maybe Cloak and Dagger was on that system, and I was just going through. But
you know, the real Atari Cloak and Dagger game should have just been Frogger, but instead of a frog, it's Henry Thomas trying to get across traffic.
yeah, trying to get across boats.
Yeah,
line up the right boats to jump.
Trying to avoid being stabbed in a boat.
I can't believe I like when he runs across traffic in downtown San Antonio. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
I was wondering how they shot that.
Yeah, he really looked like there was another scene too, where it was like, holy shit! Like it did not look. You know, granted, you have stunt drivers, but yeah, it looked very, very dangerous. If I was a parent of Henry Thomas, and also like that's my cash cow for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's get the stunt double in here, please. I love how like bad guys also like on that boat scene just have a random switchblade like stuck up their sleeve. That thing did not look secured. It was just like a slight jostling of your wrist, and down comes the switchblade, which is very like boys, like elementary school boys, you know, trying to like finagle that thing down a sleeve. Like maybe pop out in your palm.
I remember going to the Alamo and kind of scoping out where the bag drop would have occurred.
But that was actually they let him shoot exteriors at the Alamo, but they wouldn't let him shoot interiors. So that was on a soundstage in LA, at Universal, presumably, because they shot the opening scene with Dabney Coleman like parachuting in. That's on the back lot at Universal, and then they shot another scene on New York Street on the back lot in Universal. But those were the only things that were like not San Antonio. It was the interior of the Alamo, the exterior of the gaming store in the Glendale Galleria, and then two scenes that were shot on backlot at Universal. So.
I mean, I don't even know if their intention was like this thought out, but it was funny to kind of see that opening scene and see kind of Henry Thomas's imagination play out. I kind of wish they would have done more of that. Because we get to see like bad Russians like intermingling with fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
Like that guy who gets out of the car is definitely like a high-ranking German Nazi, right? With the briefcase handcuffed. What's he doing in Russia? Like
who knows?
Only a kid's imagination, right?
Yeah.
And then there's
they're all bad guys, right?
And then there's a Saudi sheik, right? Like definitely you gotta have somebody from the Middle East tossed in there. Very obvious dummy too on that retractable parachute scene.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, that was. But again, it's a kid's imagination. I just kind of wish we had that sprinkled out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
I remember I wasn't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I identified that game was like Dungeons and Dragons. But then I was very confused. I'd never played it, so I was very confused as if in when you're actually playing Dungeons and Dragons, are you throwing dice to try and knock figures over? Because at the time, it really confused me that it wasn't just like the the mingling of his imagination and reality in for that thing. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be invited to too many D&D parties if you're throwing the dice trying to knock over the
yeah,
character.
yeah,
But I mean, there's also an issue because you were the like target audience for this.
oh yeah.
And if it's
yeah.
confusing to you, then it's confusing to every fucking kid out there watching
Yeah,
this. You know, like
totally.
obviously we're all like in our fucking 40s and like know that that's not how the game would be played, but like
Yeah.
a kid would absolutely think maybe that is how the game is played.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they're also they keep calling the video game a tape because it's all grown-ups who don't know what video games are called.
Yeah.
Don't know that they're called cartridges at that point. But yeah. So I asked what memory stuck out to you most about Cloak and Dagger, and you said
I remember it being a little bit of a bummer. There's like pieces of it that are a little bit of a bummer. Like I remember, and maybe some of it is him like freaking out and crying after he like kills the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
first one's the hardest. I mean, to be fair.
yeah. Then he gets a taste for it. But I remember reacting to the fact that he is growing up without a mom, and there's a bunch of scenes that address that. I think that they have like a talk about it, and the ending where he's kind of
Well, don't give me too much.
yeah, okay, yeah. But yeah, there's just some bummer stuff around it. Some like real life. There's a little bit too much real life for it that made this separate from like the Goonies or something, you know. The Goonies I remember just being this is the exact kind of adventure that I want to have, and there's no real stakes in it. But this having like life consequences, I didn't really appreciate that as much.
so. Taste can change, and what you might want out of a movie as a 10-year-old could be totally different from what you want out of one in your 40s. Did the Cloak and Dagger, like sadder elements and real life consequences, still play in a way that turned you off of the film some?
No, I think I liked it now. I would have liked more of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
With you.
Yeah.
I would like to see it get way darker at the end. I would like to see those therapy sessions.
Yeah. You want like a full like a 10-minute coda of just him unpacking with his therapist. Yeah.
Him doing
I mean,
EMDR, it's just like eye therapy for PTSD soldiers and stuff like that.
I really did kind of like sympathize with young Henry Thomas though after he killed that guy, because it was like he goes through, you know, he'll walk through fire for Jack Flack, but like after he murders someone, I mean, granted, he tries to justify it, you know, it was him or you or something, but like you can really see Henry Thomas like flex those emotional muscles there in that scene.
Yeah. He's a great actor.
Feeling betrayed. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think Spielberg is pretty good with kids. Like he has a great knack for casting kids. He casted fucking Henry Thomas. So like the kids in E.T.
Young Christian Bale too.
Young Christian Bale. Like we really see the difference in this movie though between like when Henry Thomas is in the hands of Spielberg and Henry Thomas is in the hand of this Australian, because like Richard Franklin, the director of this, I mean, he just, especially in the first like half an hour, 45 minutes of this thing, like it's a struggle. It is not a recognizable Henry Thomas. He feels very wooden. Oftentimes his scene partner is a bratty girl or an imaginary character or just other adults. But like, I don't know, Josh, did you feel like there was a step down here in his performance?
From E.T.?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love E.T. I don't really have a like soft spot in my heart for it. It's fine. He's good in it. Like he's a good kid actor. I don't know that it's him. I think it's the material that is not really probably resonating with him until later in the film, when like the stakes are more discernible to a kid who's just acting in a movie.
True. I mean, I also think like the material is not amazing in Goonies, but I think Dick Donner does such a good job with those kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Sean Astin's a good actor as a 12-year-old or wherever he was in that. But yeah, I mean, I just don't. Yeah, and looking over this director's body of work, he does not have a lot of kid experience, and I think it shows. I think that girl was pretty much ADR the entire movie. Every time that she delivered a line, it felt like that was something that was done in a studio because she was unintelligible on the day.
And they were just like, we have to keep moving. We only have her for 3 hours.
Yeah, we got 3 hours. She might have an identical twin that we can bring in here and get a couple more takes out of. But yeah, she was a bit of a drag, to be honest, on this movie. Henry Thomas did not have a worthy friend to kind of...
A scene partner?
To play with. Yeah,
with the exception of when he's with Dabney Coleman.
And, with the exception of that. But did you look her up?
She was like a secondary character in Small Wonder.
Okay, great. That says a lot.
But she was recurring. Like, she was in like 60 episodes or something. She's not, she isn't small. She's not the, the robot girl or whatever.
Yeah.
But she can absolutely come in there like a Stephanie from Full House and say some sitcom-y, quip and leave the room. Absolutely. But the tone of this movie is just a little different. She's being interrogated. I actually thought it was kind of an okay scene at the police station or the airport with the worst fucking cop. There's a lot of times where like police are just absent or terrible in this movie.
Did you guys
Maybe this is just ahead of its time.
Yeah. It's showing the flaws
Political
in the
commentary.
Thin blue line. Did you think that Dabney Coleman and that little girl's mom were gonna fuck later on?
I think they did after.
Yeah. I mean, it really,
for sure.
it really led us to thinking like that was going to happen.
That's what I want to see.
I'll tell you,
that you want that in the coda too.
Full penetration, everything.
The movie I want to see is Henry Thomas hanging out on Skid Row with Louis Anderson.
That was I was like, oh shit, is that? Yeah, that is. That's Louis Anderson.
Crazy.
With a very noticeable.
I met Louis Anderson in San Antonio. I just know I'm connecting those dots right now.
On Skid Row?
Not on Skid Row, no. And there wasn't any
prostitutes
around.
Yeah, that was and like a very noticeable saxophone on the score, just to further double down that we are in a seedy environment.
Did you catch who his eventual taxi driver was?
I should know. He was familiar.
It's Nicholas Guest. Christopher Guest's brother.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He was the shitty yuppie in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation that lived next to the Griswolds.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's done a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, I did not clock him at all. I just was like, oh,
I was like, he looks so fucking familiar.
The guy who played Rice was somebody who I've seen a million times, but can't remember anything that I've seen him in. But I'm positive I've seen him.
Yeah,
Michael Murphy.
Michael Murphy.
Yeah, he's been around forever.
He's in Manhattan. He's the sort of questionable, best friend kind of Woody Allen's character.
They couldn't get Tony Robbins, so they got Michael Murphy. Yeah, he's done a lot. He
has 114 credits. He was, if you ever watched Tanner 88, the Robert Altman, Gary Trudeau show, he was Tanner, the presidential candidate or whatever the fuck it was. Yeah.
Hey Josh, he's in a movie called Phase 4. Have you heard of that?
Yes. I love Phase 4. I wrote a song about Phase 4.
We're doing Phase 4.
Oh wow.
We did the pre-interview last night.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
I just saw Phase 4 for the first time 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And during the pandemic, and I fucking love that movie. I think it's great. That's
probably
that is him. That is him.
Of all the Yeah, it's very weird that he has that as a credit.
Because there aren't many people in it.
No.
Right? Well, I mean,
No,
neither of we haven't watched it yet. We just did the pre-interview last
There's
night.
a lot
so-
of ants in it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Are they
Oh,
recognizable ants?
Very, yeah.
do they
Oh,
reuse
okay.
the ants in that MacGyver episode?
It's
Trumbo's Army?
Some of those guys. There's A Bug's Life. People from
Okay.
A Bug's Life are in
Right
it.
on,
Cool.
right on. So, do you still seek out fare that's less bummer centric, or has that disposition kind of changed with time?
I'm up for anything these
Okay.
days.
You also started to get into the ending of the film before Sean directed you away from it, so we weren't
Yeah.
like spoiling things or whatever. But did you feel like you remembered the ending of the film pretty clearly?
I remember the ending of the film clearly. What I didn't remember was how poorly green screened it was.
Mm.
Or amazingly green screened?
I did not feel the heat off of that burning plane on either one of them.
Off of that projected image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there was any attempt. I mean, you could tell they were working with a budget on this
Yeah.
one.
Did you know they actually killed the old couple?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know they killed three of her fingers.
Yeah, yeah. They were actually married too. That's
Oh, wow.
the them being married part is true. Obviously, they didn't kill.
Yeah. That's
I think we'd hear about it a lot more if they had killed him.
were they like
Fingers
were
aren't
they
married
like
anymore to that
people
hand.
with? They seem like people that had been actual ex stars or something like that, where they're working actors. They didn't seem like they were just some day player type people.
No, yeah. I mean, McIntyre is kind of the old guy who is the original owner of Hooch and Turner and Hooch.
Oh yeah.
But also is the sheriff in Psycho, and was the voice of Rufus in The Rescuers, which is
Oh wow.
something burned into my
That's
mind.
that's how everyone like recognized it. It was like, oh, it's a Rescuers guy, but
And Richard Franklin directed Psycho 2, right?
and FX2,
Oh wow. You see
all
that.
the best sequels.
Yeah.
His wife with the missing fingers
She was in the Big Heat.
is the voice of the widow Tweed in Fox and the Hound. So definitely like these two were oh, and she's also in The Rescuers, pulling in some animated money from the late 70s, early 80s.
This always felt like a Disney movie. I think this was in like the Disney not the section, but there was like a kids section that was mostly Disney movies at the local video store, and I remember this being in the clamshell with all that stuff. It probably, I guess it's not Disney, but I always kind of associated it with Disney.
Sure, yeah. Oh, she was also Lady Macbeth in the Orson Welles Macbeth.
Well,
Anyways.
she had a good run.
She did.
It wasn't a lot of stuff.
So we closed by asking what your expectations were for your return to Cloak and Dagger, and you said...
I definitely, it's talked about a lot more now, like that whole Kindertrauma, like the 80s were darker for kids movies. So I'm really interested to look at it with those eyes now, like, because that was just a lot of movies back then, and I'm that's kind of what I'm most excited to see about how fucked up and dark it gets while maintaining like the kids movie aspect of it.
It's fucking nuts how much it happens.
Yeah, it's wild, and I don't know. I mean, I don't follow kids stuff enough to know now, but like from what I can tell, it doesn't happen anymore.
No.
There's no like bridges like that.
Yeah. So, Kindertrauma, as you noted a little bit later than this clip, this movie was actively marketed towards kids and families.
Yeah.
And by actively marketed towards them, it looks like it was literally released to serve as 1984 Summer Olympics counter programming for kids who couldn't care less for the games.
Yeah.
How did this seemingly contrasting relationship between the heavy dark content and the film's intended audience play to you now, so far removed from when this sort of thing is prevalent?
Well, I love it because it's such an anomaly,
Yeah.
it's something you haven't seen in years and years. And I mean, again, it's hard for me to really critique this without taking, my nostalgia glasses are so like thick on this one because I watched this movie
Bill
so many
Forsythe's
times.
thick.
Bill, yeah, they're Bill Forsythe. Just hope they don't get broken. I'm shot from the head and behind.
I mean, that bullet went through the brain into the monitor, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, it did.
Not a lot of blood matter on that screen.
Not a lot of blood. They cleaned it down. They wiped it down. That's how.
Were you scared at any point?
Oh, I don't think I was scared, but the him killing the guy was just as intense as I remembered it because I thought maybe I was putting some sauce on how intense that scene was, and it was just as I remembered it.
And I think you probably have a better understanding of like how dirty the San Antonio River is now.
Yeah.
That's an ignominious place to end up if you are shot.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I the not Rice, but the other assassin guy, the guy with the big block mustache.
Mhm.
I remember being kind of scared of him when I was a kid. I remember he had very scary uncle energy or your dad's friend energy.
Haverman. He was a former linebacker.
Yeah, he looked it.
Yeah. Oh, weird. He's Rick Rossovich's brother.
Very weird.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
He's.
So, did Cloak and Dagger meet out any senior trauma on this pass?
No, I kind of feel like I could take those guys.
Okay, right on. So, moving on to picking up the scraps. Is there anything that we've missed that anyone wants to talk about?
I mean, I just think like there's some real funny stuff, I think, with Coleman that we really haven't talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is weird that we're like this far into this thing and we really haven't like espoused Dabney Coleman because like he's kind of the saving grace of this.
Yeah.
Again, I'm pretty critical of kid actors. They can fucking sink a movie. Like Henry Thomas, like he comports himself well. I think that he's at a disadvantage not having a really competent director who knows how to deal with kids.
Sure.
He's got a shitty actress for
a scene partner in a lot of these scenes.
And if she wants to come at us, fucking bring it. But I don't care that you're 6. But I mean, Coleman just drives this. There's not one scene where I feel like he's phoning it in.
Yeah.
Like this is, he's still a big deal at this juncture.
Yeah, this is only a few years after On Golden Pond.
9 to 5.
9 to 5 is right around here.
Yeah, I think it's
82, I think.
Mm-hmm. But like if for 1 second he kind of doesn't buy into this fucking plot and into this movie, like it's gonna sink so fast.
And he did that in spite of not really getting along with Richard Franklin. He there's an AV Club interview from like 2012 where he's like pretty just off the cuff shooting the shit about whatever and didn't really like Richard Franklin. He held back what he wanted to say. But he did think that Henry Thomas was great. Yeah.
And again, like, many instances where like kind of a lead and a director don't get along and yet the performance somehow still works. But like him telling to like, oh, you got to kill him first, I guess, they're coming to kill me. Well, I guess you got to kill him first.
Yeah.
Or like sitting there with a goddamn cigarette and an espresso as like blank face, sweaty face Henry Thomas running up to him and just like the coolest fucking guy, like at a table having an espresso with a cigarette and just nonchalantly telling a 11-year-old, well, you got to take these guys out, I guess.
Yeah. He really committed to Jack Black, and I like that a lot. And it is crazy that Davey's imagination is so harsh with him. Davey's imagination is really bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Cold.
if this guy is in Henry Thomas's head, then Henry Thomas wants somebody pressuring him into violence.
Yes.
And to getting 6 people at least killed.
Yeah, we're at least 6. I mean, who knows, like, who got maybe clipped in the crossfire, and like who fell off that boat when there was a fire alarm. How many people hit the brakes and went through the windshield when he ran across the street?
Yeah.
He's really bad at driving, by the way.
Yeah, he's awful.
He is a
driver.
harbinger of death.
I remember thinking as a kid that I could probably drive a car better than that.
Yeah.
I figured it out.
I did, like, in the opening credits, you see that the music's by Brian May, but it's a totally different Brian May.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh shit, Brian May, and it's not.
And now it's an
Australian guy.
Brian May.
The Dabney Coleman really brought some of the 80s dad energy that my dad had in the 80s pretty well. So I think that there's a piece of me liking this now.
Dabney Coleman brought so much of that energy that I think of him as dads in movies that he's not in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would have lost, $20 betting that he was the dad in Neverending Story. And then only recently when I went back and watched that, I was like, oh, it's the guy, it's Gerald Rainey.
Gerald McRaney.
Gerald McRaney. Yeah. But I was like, oh, that in my head, that was Dabney Coleman because of that, like, mustachioed.
Well, and you're probably mixing them from, like, Deadwood and Boardwalk Empire.
I
like
think
the old iterations of McRaney and Coleman.
No, I think that this is a kid memory that just never got corrected. Yeah, which is why I was, like, really shocked to be like, oh shit, yeah, Dabney Coleman is not in that. I probably, like, used him as a linchpin in the Kevin Bacon game unfairly.
And no one was, like, bold enough to call you out.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay. I'm trying to think else who the fuck else was in Neverending Story. Jesus. Can anybody? Oh no, it's not even.
Kid?
Yeah, the kid was from Cocoon, so we just talked about him.
Okay,
the kid was in
Barrett.
Daryl. Daryl was another.
I want to say his name's Barrett, but that's probably not right.
Yeah, I think it's Barrett something.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe I was using that kid to connect, but Dabney Coleman, man, what a
R.I.P.
I mean, R.I.P. certainly. But like,
again, Austin Zone. We talked about it last week, but for people who didn't listen, he grew up in Austin, went to UT. Zach Scott, who the theater in Austin's named after, was the one who's kind of responsible for steering him into acting.
You really do your project a huge service by casting him, especially in this era.
He seems like a guy that wouldn't, like my dad, that wouldn't have the emasculating role of an actor. Like, Dabney Coleman seems like a guy who would think that acting is kind of a pussy thing and never get into it. Just like Gerald McRaney, that they both have that energy where it's surprising they're actors because they are more likely to be carpenters or something.
Sure. So major gripes. Starting with Mike, what was your biggest gripe with the film watching it now?
Biggest gripe, I would say, just the awful blue screen at the end. Some of the action scenes were a little, like, clunky, but that blue screen at the end was really, really bad. They even the fire leading up to the just anything with the fire at the end was just really, really bad.
Again, I'll hit her again when she's down. The fucking little girl, Kim, I think is really a detriment to the whole movie, especially given how much she's in this, how pivotal of a role she plays. Like, we could have had her get, like, she misses the bus or something that he takes downtown, and then it's just kind of Henry Thomas that takes the movie from there. Also, you brought up Brian May. I think he does actually a really, really terrible job. The score, like, never really goes away. Mike, when you said that this, like, kind of felt like a Disney movie, in terms of, like, music throughout the duration of the movie, yeah, very much like a Disney movie. There's even a scene when, like, Kim is reunited with her mom at the airport, and we dip into this really maudlin violin. I think that this score is like, it's really, really obnoxious. It never really dissipates, and the audio mix of this movie is really off. There are scenes that are just really quiet, and you have to like turn your volume up to hear what's being said, especially like with Bill Forsyth and, you know, kind of plot stuff. And then we have cars screeching and gunshots, and yeah, it's the audio mix is really shitty. That's a very minor gripe compared to how bad this girl is.
Yeah.
Because I am a big Henry Thomas fan. I think he's,
Mhm.
you know, I can't think of a bad performance he's turned in. I just think he's a little hamstrung here by the powers that be.
Mhm. For me, I think it's just the when Rice has him cornered, and then he shoots at fucking
Nothing.
his imaginary friend. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we are to establish that, like, or if we're meant to believe that somehow Henry Thomas is like being in danger here has like rendered his imaginary friend real for even a moment, that needs to be fucking like pretty clearly elucidated here.
Yeah, Josh, I think you're right. I think what you could have done is that Flack goes over, like, snaps a twig or gives Henry Thomas enough of a window to pull that trigger so that the gun's not on him anymore, that he's able to pull that trigger. And then we're kind of left in that kind of cool ambiguity of like, holy shit, like maybe it's not just his imagination. There's something spectral about Jack Flack. Maybe he exists kind of in the world as this, you know, this entity. But yeah, the way that they do it, it's like, or, you know,
or I mean, his mom's dead. Like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
I think there are ways to make that work, but the way it happened didn't.
Yeah,
or Jack Flack in doing
the
that,
other.
in like pulling focus, Jack Flack actually can die in that scene, and so he has sacrificed himself for Henry Thomas to take that shot, but he just kind of gets up and like bitches about his hat.
Yeah,
and then starts bleeding out through the bullet holes.
Sure.
So how would we fix this movie for today for a modern audience? Starting again with Mike. If you don't have anything, we can come back to you. But
Mike has no notes. That's perfect, right, Mike?
I don't know, other than you have to set it in the 80s, because this is all taken care of with a cell phone real quick.
Yeah.
All this stuff. I don't know. I would lean more into the Kindertrauma, actually. I would have him.
That's where I would go to.
After he gets shot and falls into the river, he just sinks to the bottom, I guess. I wanted a shot of him staring at a floating body and grappling with what he's just done a little bit more.
Yeah. And I'd like the body to be face up.
Yeah.
So we're seeing his fucking dead eyes.
Yeah, let's have some like river crabs crawl out of his mouth too, just to fully damn Henry Thomas. Okay, so I mean, this is a fix, but it's also great. But like, Jack Flack being his dad never really made sense to me. Like, he didn't really like idolize his dad. It didn't feel like that, certainly. It didn't feel like we had a lot of like, you know, it was I hate you at what point early in the movie. It wasn't like his dad was his hero who like...
But his dad does end up getting to be the hero, and I think we're meant to see that, like, that is sort of latent within his father.
Okay, but like... And also just a weird side note, like, I don't know what kid has a wedding photo of their parents in their bedroom at this age. That was a little fucking weird. But what if they're not the same guy, right? What if Dabney Coleman gets to do the Jack Flack stuff, but we have
Gerald McRaney be his dad.
Gerald McRaney. We have another like good, strong 80s actor playing his dad. And so, you know, maybe that's really why that transition at the end would work. If we have like him thinking it's Flack coming, he thinking it's Flack coming, he thinking it's Flack coming, and then it's his dad.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a different actor, you know, I think that really sells it, that his dad now is his hero. There's just a confusing aspect to that whole thing because you did not establish that he idolizes and loves his dad early in the movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I could see like I'm trying to think of who would be the right guy to play Jack Flack.
Glenn Powell, obviously.
Bill Murray.
Glenn Powell for sure.
You could have Bill Murray.
Yeah. Bill Murray would
pre Ghostbusters probably.
Yeah.
I don't know how paternal.
Well, we had it right with Gerald McRaney. Why are we walking away from
that's
that
right.
direction?
Green light Gerald.
Yeah.
And we're talking Simon and Simon era Gerald McRaney.
Yeah, and Josh, he was Simon.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Simon.
Okay, so saving graces. What was your favorite moment or element of the film? Starting with again our guest.
I'm again Kindertrauma.
Nice.
I love me Kindertrauma. Want it more in my life. It's
so delightful.
Yeah.
Like as a non-child to see all of this like terrible shit happening to children. I love it so much.
Yeah.
I mean, if Chunk had killed the Fratellis in the Ghostbusters in Goonies, then we have a very similar situation to where we are here, right? Like that's something that's very different, right? Like bad guys fucking die in this.
Yeah.
And
there are stakes.
Fratellis are going off to jail again. But if Chunk or Data, like if his slick shoes actually like lead to the deaths of like Jake and
or just innocent people.
Yeah. Maybe that's
because innocent people die because of Davey in this.
Well, we know which one has we know which one's talked about still today a lot more between those two movies. My saving grace, of course, is Dabney. I mean, you don't have a movie with another actor there. You know, loved him in Tootsie, loved him in 9 to 5, loved him in everything I've seen him in. And I think that this is a really difficult watch without him.
Yeah.
Also, I do like that gate agent totally got shot in the dick by by the old guy. They're like, "Oh, my leg," but like, they only had to put that line in later after they're like, "Oh wow, it really looks like he got shot in the dick."
Was supposed an ADR line?
Yeah, we're gonna have to add that.
Yeah, when they were like, "Oh, we're not gonna make PG-13, or we're not gonna." Oh, this is still pre PG-13.
Pre PG-13, yeah, but like you don't see the person who says, "Oh, he got shot in the leg." You don't see that. It's wild.
Yeah,
it's a wild line. So, I definitely think he got shot in the balls.
Yeah.
And hats off to a movie with the courage to blow 2 old people up on a plane.
I just love that bodies fucking drop in this episode. In this movie. Like to me, that's my favorite part of it. Is just no motherfuckers die in this.
Yeah, and like there came very close to a couple times of like Henry Thomas's stunt person dying. Even on that weird like tuck and roll away from the airplane wheels.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, that presumably small woman almost got run over there. That small woman in a red coat almost got fucking squashed.
Moving to the final things here, final bits of business. So, Mike, we asked you if you thought you were going to like Cloak and Dagger after all this time, and you weren't sure because of the undercurrent of sadness, which had kind of kept it from being a long-term mainstay movie in your youth. How do you feel about it now after all these years?
Love it. I think it's great.
Nice. So before we say goodbye to the listeners at home, where can listeners find you, Mike?
I'm at Mike Wiebe on Instagram, and just at Mike Wiebe on Twitter, formerly known as X. Or the other way around.
I think we all still call it Twitter. This will probably come out in the fall. This episode.
Okay.
Are you going to? You may have a record coming out late this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure when, but if it's in the fall, I'm doing the Gainesville, Florida Fest. It's called Fest, and the Gamblers are there, and I'm doing stand-up there.
And that's Riverboat Gamblers for listeners.
Riverboat Gamblers, yeah, sorry. Riverboat Gamblers are performing there, and that's...
But Drakulas would be your band that has the record coming out. That's
Drakulas have a record coming out sometime soon, and yeah.
And I mean, you're in the studio for the first time in a long time for a proper album with the Gamblers.
Yeah, totally. So slowly putting that together. So hopefully next year, next year.
My final side note was that I wrote down on the sister a nickname because of the ET being in my head. I wrote more like Drew Axamore. And that's why I'm not doing stand-up anymore.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Mike. It was a fun dip back into the 80s for me. Reaffirm my Dabney love.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
And yeah, you. If we have any advice to you, it's to kill him first.
Yeah, I will. That's what taught me. This movie taught me that.
Good.
It's how you live your life, you know.
Yeah. Hey, man.
Yeah.
Mike, you got to take these guys out.
Yeah. Got to take these guys out.
Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. Anytime.
Awesome.
You've just listened to another installment of the Unkind Rewind podcast, mining and potentially ruining your childhood for content, one film at a time. Unkind Rewind is a Munchcast production and can be ingested wherever you listen to podcasts and on the Unkind Rewind YouTube channel. Music for this and every other episode of Unkind Rewind was composed by Divorcio Suave. Rate, review, like, and subscribe to Unkind Rewind on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Good Pods. Links to all our social media accounts are in our show notes, but you'll find us as at Unkind Rewind Pod on nearly every social media platform, all of which are available at our website, unkindrewind.com. If you have a question, concern, complaint, or feedback, you can email the podcast at unkindrewindpod@gmail.com or call into our call-in line, area code 507-479-6440, and leave a message that can be played on air. Fans should join the Munchcast Discord to discuss this or any other episode of the Unkind Rewind with like-minded people. This dialogue may just make it into a future episode of the pod. The Unkind Rewind Patreon will be coming soon, so start squirreling that pocket change away. Thank you for listening to another Unkind Rewind.